The clever boy excitedly showed his invention to his farmer father. He quickly removed the batteries from the radio, yet the sound could still be heard clearly. The father's weathered eyes instantly filled with surprise. The boy immediately explained that it was wind power, generating electricity through the rotation of the blades. If he could replace them with larger blades, it would be able to drive a water pump to draw water from underground and irrigate the fields, easily overcoming the long-lasting drought. But the prerequisite was to dismantle his father's only prized possession, his bicycle, to use as part of the generator. Upon hearing this, the father's anger flared up. He scolded his son's idea as ridiculous and laughable fantasy. If generations before couldn't solve the problem, how could his son's flimsy windmill tackle the drought issue? The boy, however, believed that having gone to school, he knew some new knowledge that only he was aware of. But his words completely infuriated his uneducated father, who grabbed his son and threw him to the ground. He even smashed the son's painstakingly assembled power generation device to pieces. The father then angrily scolded his son for thinking he had been spoiled, and furiously threw a hoe down beside him. The father's words attacked him like the cruelest weapons, but he could only let helpless tears flow. Was he really destined to spend the rest of his life in these hopeless fields? William listened to his father's words and diligently swung the hoe in the fields before the sun had even risen. However, he could never let go of his yearning for knowledge. In his spare time, he learned about the principles of radio by helping neighbors in the village repair theirs. Nevertheless, the noise he made often woke up his sleeping father. But faced with his child's passion, the father did not reprimand him. He just took the radio and walked alone in the fields, observing the unpredictable weather. The extreme climate caused the area to frequently suffer from torrential rains lasting for months, or scorching sun drying up the crops. The corn in this land had become the family's only source of income. But as the drought worsened, the corn yield plummeted, and the family's savings were about to run out. Even so, the father still managed to scrape together the first installment of William's middle school tuition. This sudden surprise turned the father's scolding from the day before into a heartfelt embrace. Wearing his brand new school uniform, William walked with a joyful step through the tree-shadowed forest path to the schoolyard, where yellow sand was flying. Even if the scorching sun was beating down one moment and pouring rain the next, it didn't affect his wandering in the ocean of knowledge in the slightest. However, as soon as the school bell rang, the science teacher found William and urged him to pay the remaining 80 yuan in tuition within a week. Otherwise, he would be ordered by the school to drop out and never be able to continue attending classes. Happy times are often so fleeting. His once hopeful eyes dimmed because of this. Moreover, William's first exam scores were not ideal. In order to catch up quickly, he continued to study hard every night after school. However, the faint twilight was not enough to illuminate the contents of the books, and the weak starlight and moonlight could not brighten his dull life. At this time, his mother also told William that the family could no longer afford to light the kerosene lamp. Watching his father's figure working in the fields in the pouring rain, it seemed that the poverty he was born with was destined to block his path to poetry and the distance. But he, who never resigned himself to this, went to the village dump every day with his childhood friend to hunt for treasures so that he could study better. In this pile of garbage discarded by the tobacco company, William could always find some treasures that were useful to him. However, after rummaging for half a day this time, he only found a water pump and a discarded lead-acid battery. With no tools to aid in his evening studies, William returned to the village empty-handed and happened to catch the chief holding a meeting with the villagers. It turned out that in order to save costs and reap huge profits, the tobacco company was buying the last piece of forest in the area at a low price of 15 yuan per ton, using the wood as fuel to dry tobacco. But the chief said that this part of the forest was the last line of defense against floods and sandstorms and absolutely could not be cut down easily. The father also strongly agreed with the chief's statement and resolutely resisted. However, some villagers who only cared about immediate interests would not consider the long-term future and began to take the lead in signing, causing even the unwilling villagers to follow suit. Although the father and the chief tried to persuade them, it was to no avail. They could only watch as the trees that held back the floods fell in the once hopeful forest. The fleeing flocks of birds took away the former beauty, and the howling fierce winds brought endless sorrow. The distant dark clouds obscured the future. Although William was filled with grief and indignation, he was helpless. He could only go to the bad boys' base in the village and listen to ball games with his companions to relieve his uneasiness. However, just as everyone was listening to the most exciting moment, the radio suddenly ran out of power and shut off. Everyone's eyes turned to William, who knew how to repair radios. So he hurried home under the cover of night, took out all the used batteries in the house, and returned to the bad boys' base in the drizzling rain. Sure enough, William did not disappoint. After the radio started broadcasting the ball game again, William instantly became a hero in the eyes of all the children. Walking home in the pouring rain after the game, William unexpectedly saw his sister dating the science teacher. In the backward village, this was an extremely embarrassing matter. Not only would it become a laughingstock in everyone's mouths, but it would also bring shame to the whole family. William was determined to teach the teacher a lesson. So the next day, he brought his friends, preparing to puncture the teacher's tires. However, just as he was about to take action, William began to hesitate. His friend suggested that they could remove his headlights instead. This way, not only could they send him a warning, but William would also have a lighting tool for studying at night. This time, William did not hesitate and immediately got to work. But after fiddling with the headlights for a long time, they didn't budge at all. So he followed the headlight wires and found that the end of the wire was not connected to the battery but to a silver device on the wheel. He immediately asked his friend to quickly rotate the tire. As the tire spun rapidly and rubbed against the device, a faint light gradually lit up, illuminating his life that should have been dull. However, that night, William overheard his parents worrying about their livelihood at the bedroom door because of the poor harvest. The family's savings had long been emptied, so they could only sacrifice his tuition to support their living expenses.